Hi, everybody. This is Jessie Shields. I'll be your moderator for today's conference call. We are just going to wait a few more minutes to see if anybody else jumps on. So if you want to just be patient for 2 or 3 more minutes, and then we will get started. Thank you. All right, everyone, we will go ahead and get started. As I said, my name is Jessie Shields, and I am the Digital Manager for TS Banking Group, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Just a few housekeeping items to get started with. Everyone will be muted during this presentation just so that we can get through all of the standards and the resources outlined here in this presentation. So if you do have any questions along the way, either write them down and we will have a Q&A at the end, or you can ask questions in the chat box, and towards the end we will go ahead and get those answered for you. You can find the chat box in the tab in the upper left corner that says chat. Today's presenter is going to be Kyle Osborne, and he is the director of TS Institute. So thank you again for attending this webinar, and we hope this is helpful to you. And Kyle, we are ready for you to get started.
Awesome. Thanks, Jessie. Well, afternoon, everybody, on this cold January afternoon. Excited to talk to you about 8th grade financial literacy standards and just some of the resources that go along with that. It can be a little bit, in many ways, overwhelming and exciting at the same time. So excited to provide some resources, best practices, and just provide some resources for you today. So with that, I want to start out. One of the questions I get quite often is, where do I actually find the standards, and are they easily accessible? And then also, what types of classes can I teach these standards in? And so working with the Department of Ed, they are willing to let these standards be talked about in many different ways. They live under 21st century and also social studies. My opinion is you can go under the commoncore.org and look under the Finlit 21st century standards. There's some good explanation of what the standards are, what should be taught, and those types of things. My personal opinion is that it's a little bit easier if you go under the social studies standards and then check out all of the different social studies, econ, financial literacy. They're broken out in a color-coded way, and it's just me and my mind works best with color coding. So if you haven't checked those out, please do so. commoncore.org and check those out. So this is where these are coming from. So I want to give you a 7th grade standards. If you look at those, and then 8th grade, they're hoping to build on one another. And so what I'm going to do is just grab those 4 standards from 8th grade, and then we're just going to look at different resources specific to those standards. So moving right along, just some best practices, encouragement for you. I usually like to encourage teachers, administrators, to encourage their staff to do your best lesson first. If it's the first try or the first hex, whatever that looks like in your school or semester, do the most fun, engaging lesson first. Make it memorable, make it interactive. You'll see some things that we'll talk about today. Hopefully you'll get the students up, get them moving, and get them engaging with the content. So with that, we're going to jump into the first standard related to 8th grade. So you'll notice that this standard is, if you look in the top right box, social studies, 8th grade, 0.26. So that'll be, if you're looking online or trying to figure out the coding, or if you've never looked at this before. And then discussing the components of a personal spending plan. This can be, as you know, many times difficult. 8th graders don't have a ton of income. And so the first resource I want to introduce you to, if you haven't heard of it, is called Money Habitudes for Teens. It's the top right picture. And what it is there's different questions and phrases that so the students get a deck of cards. It's a great interactive way for them to kind of self-discover their spending habits. So basically the students will get a deck of cards. These are, I think, 14, 15 bucks or so on Amazon. I don't know if you can get 4 or 5 of them and then just, pass them around the room or find somebody to actually help you pay for them. But this is a great tool. What it is, like I said earlier, there's little phrases on the cards. The students read the phrases and they separate them into separate piles. So this is like me, this is sort of like me, this is really like me, or this is not like me at all. And then as the students separate those out into 3 different piles, this is really like me. They pick up that pile and then they look on the back side of those phrases, and there's different money habits. So whether they're spontaneous, or they're a saver, or they're risk adverse, or security is a big factor, it really kind of gets them to discover their personality from a money, like a financial standpoint. So if you haven't checked those out, you can also just get Money Habitudes. That's the adult version. It's still, both of them are very, very similar. So if you haven't checked those out, I would really encourage you to do that. Get students thinking about just kind of how they spend money. On the bottom left, so My Classroom Economy, if you're unfamiliar with that, this is not necessarily a curriculum. It's more of a classroom management, not a curriculum, but a classroom management tool. And what that is kind of get students to see their classroom as an economy. They can get paid for turning their, it's a template, basically. They can get paid for being to their room on time, prepared, those types of things. And it just helps students get an idea of kind of a work environment, if you will. And so with that, it helps students turn in their work faster. I've had great conversations with teachers across the state and just how they use that tool. Maybe not in all of its robustness, but it's totally free. Vanguard puts it out, great resource. So I encourage you to check that out if you haven't. And Vicki just made a comment. You can find the standards on iowacourt.gov. Good comment. Thanks, Vicki. So Take charge today is in the middle, upper middle. There's a spending lesson in there that gives scenarios for families. And so a lot of times 8th graders, middle schoolers are looking for that experience. And so they can actually read like real life scenarios of families and what they're going through and some of the hardship or some of the successes, or man, they really want an awesome house, but they just can't afford it. And so the students actually take on more of the financial advisor hat, and you say, well, they should never do that. They should never spend their money in that way, or they should save their money. And it gets students actually engaging the content and just saying, instead of just saying you should spend your money on this and here's a normal budget, those types of things. So that's a great resource. I really like the family scenarios because they're realistic and they just help the students make it real life. In the middle, next year in personal finance, there is this particular lesson. So we will send you the PowerPoint, and then you can just click on these slides and it'll open up the link on each one of these images. But this particular lesson, it has a connection to an online game. I believe Scholastic produced a game called Road to Success. And what the 8th graders would do is walk through this game online, and then this next gen personal finance lesson coincides with that game. So as the students are discovering how do I make choices through, should I save, should I spend, those types of things, and they're starting to see how their behaviors are impacting their financial future, if you will. So it also gives them an opportunity to make choices, and that's really the best way, in my opinion, that students learn, is helping them make those choices. Which leads me into Money Island is an online game, not so much strong in like helping students develop a spending plan and income, but it gives students an experience of saving their money, investing their money, spending their money, those types of things, and also sharing their money. So it just gives them an online platform. You can just type in Money Island in the Google search, and you should be able to find somebody who's sponsoring that. In the middle right, you got choices. This curriculum really does focus on student choices. So it talks about what happens if you drop out of school, what happens if you stay in school. Could those behaviors actually help your financial future? And so it just helps them think about it from a practical sense of, man, as soon as I get into 10th grade, I'm dropping out. Well, those choices will actually help, hinder your future income and also some of your spending choices because you will have less money. And so that's another option. That one, usually you have like a volunteer come in and do that in the classroom. So it's just another opportunity for you. And then the bottom right, that does not have a hyperlink to it, but I've gone in and done different classes in Southwest Iowa specifically, and some of the best feedback that we've gotten from the students is that we encourage the students, okay, so on a Friday night, go home and actually walk with your parents, or whenever they go grocery shopping, have the students actually track how much it costs to feed their family for a day. And so if that means totaling up the cost of spaghetti or totaling up the cost of going out to eat on a particular Friday night or Tuesday night or whatever it is, and actually seeing how their parents actually making money. So a lot of parents are a little leery of like, I don't want to tell them how much I make, but maybe help them understand that money is coming in and then money is also going out. And so connecting the dots, that isn't just their parents magically appear with groceries, but helping them connect those dots. So that's just more of a encouragement for you as an educator to engage the parents and just helping you engage more in the classroom too. So moving on to the second standard, this one was a more difficult standard. There are lots of different resources out there, but the resources that I want to put before you are going to be a little bit easier, really do accomplish the standard. And so in my honest opinion, this is a difficult standard to cover, especially for 8th grade, just the cost of borrowing. And so I want to throw out maybe some best practices and have you mull over some different resources. So if you look in the top left, the Take Charge lesson, they have a pretty good lesson on can you handle the debt? And so it's a little bit more of a scenario-based opportunity for the students to say, well, if this is my income and I want to borrow this much on, let's say, a particular car or buy something on a credit card, does your income actually, is it able to support that? The other cool thing about this lesson, and it's not really exciting, but it helps students connect the dots. There's a disclosure agreement. And so I think a lot of people get taken advantage of. They just don't read the disclosure, don't really read what they're signing up for, and they get into a situation where they're in trouble. And quite honestly, that's what happened in the 2008, 2009 housing market crash when our economy almost died, if you will, is what happened is people were signing up for home loans and they were not realizing all the different disclosure agreements that they were signing up to. And so even just connecting the dots of, the other idea I had with that is to have them watch a couple videos of people that have struggled. You know, you can find quite a few of those on YouTube of like, man, I wish I would have known what I was signing up for. And so just connecting those dots that it's not just a spending situation, you know, income and expenses, but the borrowing can actually cripple you for a lifetime. And so helping the students connect with that. Moving to the middle left, the next gen personal finance. This one is a compound interest lesson. So you might be thinking, well, why would I do compound interest? Isn't that, you know, what do I want investing? And the reason I put this in there is because there's a cat insanity game that literally will drive them nuts. It's a game that different cats pop up and you have to actually feed the cat. And then once you feed it, it goes away. But the faster you get, the faster the cats pop up and the students kind of go insane. Like, I can't keep up with all this. And the point of that game is to show that the more that you either save, the more interest that you can make. On the flip side, it can actually show the negative effects of borrowing. So once you start borrowing or getting a loan, if you will, sometimes the interest on it creeps up on you and it becomes overwhelming. You get, oh my goodness, I can't handle this. It's too stressful for me. And the students actually get an emotional response to, oh my goodness, I can't afford this. And so helping them connect those dots of trying to keep their debt at a low, manageable, instead of letting it creep up and be overwhelming, which many of the adults that I talk to, they wish that somebody would have helped them kind of discover that at an earlier age. So the top right is the high school financial planning program. You might think, well, why would I want high school when I'm teaching 8th grade? Quite honestly, in my opinion, this is one of the best resources out there. They have a phenomenal line by line showing the different things that you could buy. So some of the examples are you can buy a computer, a stereo, a car, a truck, a TV, and it actually has the students calculate, well, if this is how much the item is, this is what the interest is, and this is going to be your monthly payment. And then it actually helps the students see, man, you're not actually going to spend $300 on a TV, you're going to spend $450 on a TV. And it helps the students actually see the negative effects of debt related to interest. So it's a really good tool. On the bottom left, I have a picture of a bank there. Have a guest speaker in. So this isn't anything that you have to do from like a preparatory standpoint. You can just reach out to your local bank or credit union and just say, hey, I would like my students to understand what the cost is to borrowing, and just have somebody come in and talk about, well, this is what's needed to borrow, and highly encourage that guest speaker to talk about, to actually help the students understand, well, what you borrow isn't only what you have to pay back, you have to actually pay back the interest on top of that, and really helping the students get that. The last one is the Credit Karma. I think you've probably heard of that, but they have a pretty good amortization table to show the actual debt, the payments, the interest, and the principal. So it actually gives you a trend line of this is how much debt you have, this is how much interest you paid each month, this is how much you actually paid for the particular item. So it actually shows the students, well, if I buy a TV and this is the payment and this is the interest, it's actually going to cost me this month much. And so you can actually have the students do their own self-discovery. Say, all right, for the next hour or 45 minutes, I want you to list 5 things that you would like to buy. Use this amortization table. You don't have to call it an amortization table, but use this tool and it's going to calculate how much it's going to cost you, and then have the students actually record that. I think that would be a good self-discovery method, and I think it would be really helpful. So moving right along, standard number 3, explain how investing may build wealth and help meet your financial goals. This can be a super nebulous thing. Again, if the students don't have cash, or if they're like, man, I have no interest in the stock market, or I don't even know what a mutual fund, I have no idea. And so I threw up some different resources up there for you. I shouldn't say, great resources for you. So the Take Charge today is in the top left. They have great content on investing. One of the cool tools that I really like with this resource is they have a dice rolling activity on risk and reward. And so the students, they are in a situation where they can choose 6 dice to roll or 1 dice to roll. Well, as we know, if you roll 1 dice and you're trying to get a particular number, it's going to be harder to get that than if you have 6 dice and you're trying to roll that 1 number. And so it kind of helps the students connect the dots of, well, it's a little bit more risky, but there's higher reward. And so helping them connect the dots with that. On the middle left, the compound interest calculator, I love this tool because the students can actually type in, I'm going to save $10 a month. My age is 12 or 13 or 14 or whatever it is. And then the interest rate, so you can just throw a, I don't know, let's just say 2% or 5% or whatever you want to do. And the students can actually see how, if they save $20 a month, $10 a month, how much that compounds over their lifetime. And there'll be a great image on the right side showing interest and principal. That's pretty powerful. So the bottom left, Next Gen Personal Finance, great interactive investing lesson. And that's connected to the Stacks resource on the right side. The students actually get to see a portfolio. And what I mean by that is there's mutual funds, there's commodities, there's savings, there's lots of different stock options. And so there's just tremendous amount of opportunity there for the students to actually see this isn't just a one-stop thing. It isn't just buy a CD or buy a stock, but there's so much out there. The middle, the stock market game. If you have never done that before, it's a great resource. It's a great introduction to investing, mutual funds, shorting, longing. If all that's overwhelming to you, I put together a Prezi that walks through just some of the basics of investments. And so I would encourage you to check that out. The middle right, I would just encourage you, so this New York Stock Exchange picture doesn't have a hyperlink. This is just to encourage you to have the students track a stock, a bond, a mutual fund. Have them track it every class period. Have them track it once a week. Get them to open a Google Sheet. Have them put the different ticker symbols in, and just have them open up Google Finance or Yahoo Finance, and just have them track it. Help get them familiar with it, get them kind of excited about what it looks like to just look at a company, or once you've kind of gone through some of the basics, you can check out the Prezi, and then once you've gone through some of the basics, then just have them check it out. Give them a grade on, are you checking your investment? Get them familiar. The top right, again, this is another resource. It shows the time value of money. So one thing that I think students, adults, all alike, we don't realize is that $1 today is very different than $1 in 20 years. And so it really shows the students that inflation is a part of that if they aren't investing, they're actually losing money. So I want to encourage you to check that out. Maybe not so much as like a classroom resource, but more as a resource for you, just to give you some more foundation, if you will. And real quickly, the last one, the fourth standard that we're looking at, identify ways of insurance may minimize personal risk. This one can be a tough one. This resource, Take Charge, so you're seeing a little bit of redundancy in resources, quite honestly, because these are some of my favorite ones and some of the easiest to introduce into your classroom. So the Take Charge resource gives you some great scenarios. So you got in a car accident, what type of insurance do you need? There's also an awesome game. If you've ever played the game of spoons, you start with a deck of cards, and everybody starts out with 4 cards, and you just pass them around the circle. Once somebody gets 4 of a kind, then they grab a spoon out of the middle. The last person that doesn't get a spoon is out of the game. And so what Take Charge has done is they've created an insurance version of spoons. So students are playing a game. So there's some cards, and it might be I get in a car accident, liability, collision, and full coverage. So all of those would match under car insurance, and boom, you got all 4. So it helps the students have a game, kind of a fun way to learn about insurance. In the middle, you see a fly swatter, and you're like, what is that? A fly swatter, I found that when you're teaching vocabulary, it's always good to have some tool or some game. So I've used a fly swatter, and Take Charge does this really great illustration where you take a bunch of words and you put them on the board, and then you have 2 teams, and you read the definition, and then each team has a person in the front, and they run to the board and they swat whatever word that would match that definition. So there's a little bit of competition, a little bit of excitement. It's a great tool. The bottom left resource, Next Gen, has a great lesson related to recommended insurance policies that everyone should have. So it gets students thinking about, well, what types of risk in my life are there? Do I have any risks? Is it worth it? And so I want to take a step back for a minute. When you're teaching this, I think it's sometimes a little, we can get into the weeds, if you will. And so keeping it high level, keeping it super simple, insurance is to shift risk. Quite simply, that's really what it is. So you're saying, I want to pay you, insurance company, to take my risk instead of me take the risk. And so you can actually talk to students about, which kind of leads me into my bottom right picture, is it always true? High risk means lots of money. And so getting students to think about like, well, if you're driving a car and somebody hits you, how many of you would be okay paying for those damages if they didn't have insurance? You'll have some people raise their hand because they're a little bit more risky, if you will. You'll have other students that are less risky. So just giving the students opportunity. Well, how many of you would not have health or would pay $100 for health insurance? You'll maybe get some students, or as you increase your dollar amount, you'll have less students raising their hand. So giving them different examples of what are you willing to pay for that risk. And so helping the students actually connect the dots of usually more risk when it comes to insurance means higher premium. So you're going to pay more for that. One thing that I did forget with the Next Gen Personal Finance resource is there's a Quizlet game helping the students learn the vocabulary also, which is a great tool. So moving to our last resource, the high school financial planning program, they give students scenarios and what they're willing to pay someone else to take the risk. So again, going back to that basic understanding of insurance, you're basically defraying the risk. You're saying, I want to pay you so that if I get in a car accident or something happens to my leg, you insurance company will cover me. So really getting the students to say, what are you willing to pay for? What are you willing to not pay for? So with that, that wraps up our resources for today. Here's a couple other different resources just to get you thinking about. So these are some of the resources that we already went through. The TS Institute is the organization I work for. You can check out our website there. The bottom left book, Bridges Out of Poverty, if you're working with students that are in a low, moderate income or just in a really tough home, it's a great book to just help your understanding, just how to teach to them. And then Winning the Money Game, a friend of mine, Adam Carroll, wrote a great book. A lot of teachers are using it in their English class, but they can also use it in their financial literacy HEX or whatever. But it's just a great basic entry-level book when it comes to personal finance. So I want to open it up for questions, and hopefully we didn't go too fast. I want to open it up for questions and answer some of those. All right. Doesn't look like we have any questions at this point. So I want to honor your time. It is 4 o'clock. If you will, at the end of this, as our webinar finishes for the day, if you would take the quick survey, we will be sending out a gift card for those that filled it out. We'll draw one name from the pool, and we'll be sending that out in a couple days. So I want to thank you on behalf of Vicki Vermeer, myself, the Iowa Council, TS Institute. It's been a great series so far. A lot of great teachers asking a lot of great questions, doing a lot of great things. So I want to thank you on behalf of us and for what you do for the students in Iowa. And I hope you have a great Tuesday.